Yo, retrogrades and parish orphans and folks of every side out there. We are here on the brand new, just opened Christian Masculinism channel. And today we're going to be talking about a reflection of nature in the workplace, in the American workplace. That is to say, why do high earning, high ranking corporate men turn back to Jesus, whereas high ranking, high earning corporate women turn especially decidedly away from Jesus? And of course, Will Noland, Nick Stumphauser, and myself are joined by special guest today, mutual friend, I think introduced by Will, Mike Pantile. Mike, you're on Instagram at your name and your Twitter handle, and you are traveling in precisely the same direction we are, which is to say, up the stream against the current as a Christian masculinist. Thanks for joining us today. How the hell are you?
Dude, doing very well. Like I said, we were saying before we hit record, it's an honor to be on the show with you guys. I've been listening since episode 1, so praise God. Happy to be here with you guys.
So what's your, and thanks for being with us. It's great to have you. You automatically sense a kindred spirit. What's your experience like, and what's your current like equipoise in the Christian masculinism world? One can tell that you're into this. I've been following you for a few weeks on Twitter, and I'm like, I love what this guy does. He sounds like one of us, and the us here is it's a pretty small club, because just to say, yeah, I want to set you up so that you know particularly what drew us to your account. It's really, really, really important to understand that every day when we get up and we do the things we do, raise our families, that path that gets us to heaven, we call out a morning offering and we bless everything, christen it in the name of the teleology. We're doing it because of Jesus. But a lot of the Christian men in the Catholic space, and I think Protestant and Orthodox as well, but especially Catholic, have forgotten how to be men. And that's not an overstatement. They're ruled by their wives. Doesn't matter whether they're trad or Novus Ordo. They are henpecked by their mother-in-laws, and in some cases even their father-in-laws, who are perpetuating the cycle of violence, if you will.
Yep.
Downward cycle in family. Just kind of, it's a distaff rule. It's a tyrannical distaff rule by females. And they're kind of just doing what they can to survive. They keep their head on a swivel, but not like a Marine. They keep their head oriented in such a direction as to not get in trouble. I can't think of any other way to say it, because their household, like 99% of the households out there, Christian or secular, are disordered. And they're literally henpecked almost to death every day. And that disables them from leading, and it disables them from doing what they do. And their households are fundamentally dysphoric. So the manly part of what we do, we were all just talking about lifting before we started. This has been stamped out like the manhood of Christian men. So like, I see you fitting into that space wonderfully, and I've been following your texts and retweeting you. Tell us about where you see yourself fitting there.
Well, I appreciate the compliments, first of all. That means a lot. Dude, I was raised Roman Catholic. I fell away from the faith, became an atheist for a period of time, and then came back to the faith by way of Protestantism. And I guess we'll get to where I'm at now in a little bit. But fundamentally, for my since I became a Christian again, I guess in like 2012, 2013, I just noticed this effeminacy in the faith, just profound effeminacy in the faith. And that feminism has really gotten its tentacles intertwined within the church, and it's been so for decades. You see female pastors, you see these sermons that avoid the more, I guess, quote unquote, controversial topics that go against sort of like the cultural zeitgeist, within the church. And it came to a point where, and this was post baptism in October of 2022, that I got tired of just complaining about it. And I'm obviously missing whole lot of backstory there, but just to keep it sort of somewhat brief, I just saw this gap and I said, you know what, instead of complaining about it, why don't I try to be an example? My life has left some clues. I've started a successful business. I lost over 100 pounds. I've lifted some weights, set some records in powerlifting. I lived a very degenerate red pill past. And it was a period of, I discovered it in 2014 and didn't really become unplugged from it until 2021 or so. So there was a period of time there where I was essentially living like the prodigal son, eating out of the pig's troughs with the prostitutes. And so come to post baptism in October of 2022, I just said, hey, let's start talking about what I've learned in the faith, what I'm continuing to learn in the faith, in relationship with Jesus and reading the word. And, it was crazy. That's how I met Will and Tim. That's how I got, tuned into what you were doing. And quickly the page grew. A lot of the biggest accounts, sort of saw my content and resonated with it. And I'm very grateful. It just kind of goes to show you that, when God blesses something that we're doing, it flows seamlessly. And so now I have a podcast with arguably the biggest page in the space. Shout out to my buddy, Brendan, Masculine Revival. Started a coaching business on the back of it. And essentially just not that I am anybody to look up to. The whole goal was I want to be a compass that turns people to Christ, which is the ultimate masculine role model, and trying to take what I believe to be, we can all agree, the true definition of masculinity comes from the Bible, not just in Jesus Christ, but in the example of the saints and the apostles. And I saw this discrepancy between like the higher level theologians and the pastors and the priests that I think speak over the heads of a lot of people like myself. So I kind of felt like the way that I kind of fit in is by talking about this stuff in more layman's terms. So the guys, the Joes in Missouri, quote unquote, can understand it and connect with it. So that's the short story long, I guess.
Tim was the first time I've heard somebody use the word equipoise, and it wasn't an allegation of the use of anabolic steroids. So he's not questioning.
No, that's what I was trying to bring up. How do you have an 800-pound deadlift?
Yeah. So
WTF.
That was a slight jab there at your.
That was funny. That was way over my head. I woke up at 3:30 this morning. So forgive me, gentlemen. I'm a little bit dull today. No, praise God, lifetime drug-free, hand-on Bible. There's been times I've considered it. Me and Nolan have talked about it. And I could probably achieve a lot more if I were to go on. I'm turning 31 on Sunday. And so I'm getting into like the peak strength years. But to me, it just seems like a narcissistic and vain pursuit. I've squatted over 600 pounds a bunch of times. I've bench pressed over 400 pounds now and deadlifted 800 pounds, pretty much very well in both stances. And so why do I need more than that if things are still progressing, if God has given me this body that can produce such strength? And I don't like to, be on a high horse about it, but there's obviously a genetic component there, mentally and probably physically. And so I think there would be a slapping in his face if I were to try to use these exogenous hormones for what reason other than just like social media clout. Because once you turn that corner and you start using drugs, you can never say you're natural again. And I want to keep that feather in my cap. That's where I'm at right now. So at least.
Yeah.
You said 3:30 a.m. Are you Mark Wahlberg? Are you up drinking liquefied chicken and running a mile?
No, dude, I'm a former fat dude, and I still eat somewhat like that. It's just a little bit more structured. I wake up early. It's not usually 3:30 in the morning. I'm not one of those manic individuals. Well, it depends on the season, but just one of those days I was excited to wake up.
No one's that excited to wake up without drugs.
True.
Mike is.
I skipped the meth today. That's later.
Okay.
That's later.
Mike, I want to know more about what masculinity meant to you during your period of atheism and the red pill degeneracy, and how it's different from how you understand it now. Because you were, by lots of their metrics, a super successful guy. You had a gym business that was making money. You were sleeping with women and living that promiscuous, degenerate lifestyle. That's the dream, isn't it?
Yeah, and when I realized quickly that men are sold a false bill of goods, through guys like Tate and all the other degenerates, the male feminists in the sphere. And I unfortunately had to experience it firsthand. What it meant to me at that time was six-pack, six-figure salary, and sleeping with as many women as possible. Where I found it really interesting that the more success in the world, being of the world, that I accumulated, the more depressed and more empty, more hollow I felt. There was more and more drug use and alcohol use around these sort of interactions with women. And then I quickly realized that despite my appearance, quote unquote, I wasn't built for that. And I think that's not a conversation a lot of these men want to have, is that it's very popular to talk about being promiscuous, but a lot of men, and I'm sure Tate could probably relate, we want love from one woman. We want true commitment. We want that kind of virtuous marital covenant. And I just think we've been so brainwashed into thinking that that's not the way, that men end up sort of deceiving themselves into thinking that actually, I need to get all these notches under my belt and sow my wild oats, so to speak, in order to sort of gain this like masculine fulfillment and wisdom. And a lot of guys say to me too, it's easy to say now that you've been through it. Okay, they can say that all they want. I'm speaking truthfully that there's nothing there. And what it means to me now is being a man that's perfectly capable of having options, because there's nothing virtuous about being an incel. Nothing. There's nothing virtuous about that. But if you're a man that's capable, you make great money, but you choose not to, you show that the fruit of the spirit, temperance and restraint, that is true masculinity. What resonated with me, Will, and this is what made me reach out to you, was there's that snippet from that podcast where you said the ultimate display of masculinity was when Christ was being led up to the cross, and he could have, within a blink of an eye, eviscerated his enemies, did not take the pain relief, and still went forward in, fulfilling the will of his Father, showing that the ultimate form of restraint and temperance. So that's essentially what it means for me now.
Yeah, and you have a wife and a kid now, right?
Correct. 2 beautiful little girls. And a wife, and hopefully God blesses us with many more children. But I never thought I'd be a girl dad. Even though it's a cringe term, I'm going to use that term. We'll see. Tim and Will, you guys both have 7 kids. Is that right?
8.
Yeah.
Will's winning. 8.
8. Come on, man.
Yeah, not yet, but coming soon. And plenty of girls too. And it's interesting, isn't it, being a guy who talks about what it means to be a man and then having daughters, because you can see how the two relate. And I see a mistake that a lot of guys make who really buy into the patriarchy ideas, and they buy into muscle, strength, all these good things in natural law, but they will almost treat their daughters like they're boys. Like they'll get the girls doing lifting, taking it really seriously. They make them hyper competitive. But I actually think that if you're a guy who's into patriarchy, you want to be toning it down a lot in all those areas for the girls and keep them soft, keep them feminine. But it's weird. I don't see much of that. Have you spotted that too, Mike?
Yeah, it's something that I've given a lot of thought about, because when I met my wife, she had done a powerlifting competition. She lifted heavily and she was in fantastic shape. And it's funny seeing her demeanor change around that as well. And she was never masculine, and she was kind of the exception to the rule. And so when my first daughter came into the world, I said, do I really want her taking sports seriously? Even before you guys explored the idea of, women in blood sports being indicative of sort of us getting into the collapse of civilization. And first of all, let's be real. Like, do any of us take female sports seriously?
Kind of a contradiction in terms.
Right? I mean, it's like, and then you watch UFC and you see Joe Rogan's, like, his reaction to when these women are like punching each other in the face, and it's just like the gayest thing I've ever seen.
Dude, I said this to Nick the other night. I was like, so Joe Rogan has a routine where he's kind of making fun of female sports. And I was like, what's the kind of about? Sports are inherently masculine. They're all about training. The athletic skills for battle. Yes, even the sports ball sports. And Rogan's taking some shots at it. Then I'm like, bro, all I've seen are meme after meme after meme of you on undercards and co-main events where you're like, whoa, she hit her in the face and it didn't do anything because she's just a girl. But I'm going to pretend it's badass. That's phony, man. I do side by sides of those and I call bullshit. I don't like it. There's one sport for girls. It's called field hockey. Most people don't even know what it is anymore. It's literally a sport designed specifically for girls. That's for girls. All the other sports, even the crappy ones like soccer, are for guys. Sorry.
I fully agree, because I had these thoughts. A lot of my closest friends are either current or ex pro MMA fighters. They're like, "Oh yeah, put your daughters in jiu-jitsu and all this stuff." And I had this idea before I became a father. Yeah, this is a great idea. But I said, if they interact a threat in person, jiu-jitsu is not going to save them.
Nope.
A weapon is going to save them, not jiu-jitsu. So like this whole, it's self-defense it's bullshit.
Like,
And
yeah,
so,
sorry.
but no, go ahead, man.
Just a rapist coming after them, and like they get on the ground and start lifting their legs up, like, come on,
Yeah.
come
Yeah.
on. Yeah.
Talk about doing the opposite of what its intended use case is, right? Like, let's be honest. So yeah, the way that I approach it with my daughter, she's I have two of them. One is 4 months old, the other one's 2.5. So she's Amadea, my older one, is down here with me all the time. But you know, she looks at me and you could tell there's fear there. And I'm like, yeah, you kind of should be somewhat afraid of the weights. Just take it. It's just fun. It's not supposed to be serious. Even my wife, she just does it just to stay in shape now. And I'm going to make sure that, you know, of course, if they want to play sports, they can do that. But it's kind of drilled into their head that this is just for fun. Don't stress out about this, because as we all know, like I've met competitive female athletes, and there's a masculine edge to all of them. It's unavoidable.
Of course, it builds this stuff builds testosterone and builds manly competitive spirit. No, like it's dysphoric, and it builds it. And then people have asked me, does that mean when you go out and you're doing basketball drills in your driveway with or without your son, if your daughter wanders out there, she's not allowed to like shoot the ball once? Of course not. But you see it, the natural female desires. Like I got 6 daughters. I'm close with all of them. All the older ones will, from time to time, especially Pitt, will wander out there and be like, Daddy, what do? You're just shooting free throws for an hour. And they'll like either rebound for a few minutes or rebound and take a shot or something. But Pip will come out and rebound. And she's like, do you mind if I shoot a few times? Like, no, that's cool. They do it for 4 minutes and they're like, all right, I'm going to go play inside. They're always playing house in their room. I'm going to go play house again. I'm like, cool. That's natural. That's letting nature take its course. I have neighbors that drive by, and this is the most conservative state in the union, that drive by. They're like, if they ever see me, I'll play hide and seek out there with them. They invented a game. It's called Scare Hall. I have no idea how they made up the name, but I'll be playing that. And they're like, oh, well, you got to get them on the basketball court. You got a whole team. And I'm like, no, I don't. I have one player, one little boy, you know, and they don't know. They don't have the categories for it because it's zogged like Agenda 2030. If you go check, it has girl sports, push it hard. And they've been doing it since about right before Kobe died.
I mean, all the way back to a league of their own, like World War II, and the guys are off there and, oh, well, women can play baseball as well. And in fact, it's even kind of fun. Like, oh, wow, did you see her hit that ball like 30% the distance of like the weakest player?
Yeah.
There might be a career in this.
Yeah, exactly. It's condescending, patronizing. It's patronizing.
Ironically enough.
It is.
Well, we were talking about this last night, the idea of the masculine desire to preserve and protect feminine purity and femininity in general. And I just find it kind of interesting that the 3 most masculine men I know are just daughters all the way through. And I think there's something beautiful about that, because you would think like, oh, well, if the true path toward masculinity and engendering what we believe in the world would be having sons and making mini yous. Right. When in fact, I think what it is restoring the hope that young men will have that there are beautiful, virtuous women out there with whom to fall in love. Yeah. Because we were also talking about how so many guys don't believe in love anymore. They think they believe 2 things. First, romance and love are not real, and if they are real, it's not worth the risk, because you could you'll lose half your money, or you'll go through divorce, or all these things. And then the second is this belief that women are inherently whores, that they have no virtue, that they're all corrupt or all easily corruptible. And how inspiring would it be if Will, how many daughters do you have?
So I got 2 boys and 5 daughters currently, and the eldest one's coming up for late teens now, 18, 16. and they match the description of what you're talking about. And the guys who meet them see, oh, I thought this was a unicorn. No, it's real.
And as a young guy who has been on the receiving end of the degeneracy of the world, and unfortunately a contributor to it in my previous years, encountering a woman who's truly kind, just literally kindness toward a young man is enough for him to go, okay, what do I got to do? I'll do whatever it takes. And so I think it's interesting that there's going to be 12 young women in the world as a result of you guys. And it's probably going to do more good than like a bunch of young guys running around who can, no offense, but bench a lot of weight. Because now the other guys are going to go out there and be like, well, now I got to bench a lot of weight.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It's
that's
like setting the bar.
It was very, very sobering having my daughter when she came out. We didn't find out, the sex beforehand. We did it with the second, but not with the first. And it shattered my whole world temporarily. My ego just like fell to the floor. I was like, I'm going to have a boy and I'm going to raise. And God obviously did that very purposefully, because I don't think I would have had the revelation of Jesus that I had. I mean, I called myself a believer then, but I was far from it. I would have not had the revelation that I have now, really looking at myself as a man critically as like, okay, well, if she brings home somebody like me when I was younger, I'd know I've failed. So like, let's take inventory of who I really actually am. And that drew me, closer to Christianity. And then now, as you know, Tim and Will, closer to Catholicism. So praise God for that. Praise God for daughters.
That's really beautiful. And it's one of the ways that marriage works as a sacrament too, because it's not just about the natural institution of childbirth, procreation, but it's also about you and your wife working together and helping to sanctify each other. And I found the same thing, Mike, with the more kids that I've had, the more daughters specifically, it softened me and healed some of my defects. And we're similar personality-wise, I would guess, if you put us on the psychometric testing, but not the sort to walk away from arguments or walk away from a hard set in the gym. So we actually need it. And my wife often laughs about what I would probably be like had we not lived our lives together, if I was just a single guy. And it wouldn't be pretty.
Yeah, we're pretty low on disagreeableness, right? Right, Will, would you say?
Or yeah, high on disagreeableness, low on agreeableness. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Will's like, I disagree.
Yeah, I disagree. It's like, there you go.
Nick, you said something. Sorry, go Tim.
No, you got it.
Before
I want to agree with you. Well, all of us are high on disagreeability and trying to be more agreeable. So I agree with whatever Will's question is.
Nick, you said the slogan for the women's sports was push it hard. And what they're being pushed in the direction of is self-hatred. Give you an example. My girls like to do a little bit in the gym as well, but I never really drive them or push it hard. But with my son, for example, he's 14 now. He's taking it a bit more seriously. The other day, he was complaining that the bar hurt his back a bit. It was a bit sore, just resting on the top of his back when he was doing his squats. And I just said, well, okay, fine. Who cares? It hurts a bit. Your whole life's going to hurt a bit in lots of ways, a lot worse than this set. And he just kept going with it with a couple of little tears in his eyes. And I just said, you can go indoors if you want, but it's not going to be a good thing. Then he finished it, stopped crying, and then did about 3-4 more sets. And by the end, it was like, you know what, Dad? It was the right thing to keep pushing through that. With my daughters, though, I wouldn't do that. They're not enjoying it. That's it. Call the session, go indoors, go do some baking instead. They don't need that lesson.
Just
absolutely based. And I agree fully.
Even that difference in approach to it is radical now. I really hate to sound so boomer about it. Like back in my day, but not that I had it back in my day, of course. But to even approach something like that where you're not going to inspire or encourage something that's going to be masculine virtue, which is like perseverance in the face of hardship. Like, well, that's literally what men are for. And if your daughter's got it, then that blossoms into the type of girl who later in life, she's telling an 18, 19, 20-year-old guy who's tried to build all this virtue, well, I know how to deal with this. I don't need you. I can deal with this pain. And he goes, well, shit, then have a good day. Like, what the hell am I here for? I've been spending the last several years of my life purging sin and trying to grow in virtue. And here, come to find out, you've got it all taken care of. Well, have a good day. Thank you.
Yeah, it's in Greek myth, isn't it? Without Andromeda tied to the rock, Perseus just flies on by. There's no heroism.
That's exactly right. Well, yeah, without to tie together a few of the themes here, without the possibility of Andromeda's exclusive love, even though men are torn in a bunch of different directions by their eyes, the exclusivity of the love, there's really no heroism in the world, because what men eat, drink, sleep, cogitate on day in, day out is women. And they really want the exclusive love of one woman. Fundamentally, like, oh, Christian men, maybe, because they're essentially castrated. No. All men. Me and Nick were talking about fiction, like written fiction last night, which is not something we talk about a lot, given what we work on together. And it's at the heart of so many stories. We were talking about The Catcher in the Rye. The Zoomer generation has totally missed the point of that novel, which is all about maintaining the sexual purity of young maidens. That's literally what the name of the novel is. Or all the way to things like Crime and Punishment, or even the song Roxanne, is all about the natural inbuilt desire of young men to help beautiful young maidens preserve their purity. It's a natural desire, not a Christian desire, where modernity built this false Machiavellian line between like Christian desire and real men's desires. And nothing has actually accrued more to the burden of men, because Christian men are natural men. Christian men are the most natural man. Jesus was the most man. And with that, I want to talk about this study that Will found, that Nick found actually. But first, I would just ask you to give us the 30-second snapshot, Mike. Where are you on the faith journey? You said you're looking again at Roman Catholicism, and you probably heard online it's a hell of a time to come back, given what's going on with the Pope. I'm thrilled that you're even giving it a second look in view of what our Pope is doing.
Yeah, I don't even know how to begin speaking on him, but beyond that, and honestly, I approached this topic, and I was telling Will, with a bit of there's a bit of natural trepidation, because a lot of my friends and a lot of people that I know in the space are all Protestants, and my intention is not to even, with me reverting, is to be the guy that dunks on Protestantism, because I just
That's me.
That's you. I got to leave that to you. I think we're talking about the honey and vinegar thing, Will, but besides that, where I'm at with the faith is, honestly, man, like I've always said that if my walk with Christ leads me to the Catholic Church, that's where I'm meant to be. And in the last month or so, I have no idea where this has come from, but I've been thinking about, okay, Catholicism. Why am I thinking about this? It's a sincere pursuit of truth and understanding, philosophically, intellectually, and spiritually, of the faith that I possess. And there was a big point here. When I would see you, Tim, when I would see you, Will, let's say bashing Protestants and backing it up, not just bashing for the sake of bashing, I don't know how to defend my position. So that means I don't really have a strongly held position if I couldn't actually back it up. So that prompted me to, read into sola scriptura, the idea of sola fide, and getting back to the church and where did this actually come from? And in prayer and in reading the word and in digging into apologetics and the resources that you guys have sent over to me, I'm experiencing this like fullness of the truth of the faith that's very palpable, that's very real. I haven't gone all the way and contacted a priest and finished my confirmation, because that's the only thing that I'm missing at this point. I've been baptized, I've done the communion process, I just haven't been confirmed. I'm on the razor's edge, and I'm not sure if I'm just overthinking it and that I need to answer all of these questions about Marian dogma and purgatory and the confession and all that stuff. But essentially, it's just been the sincere pursuit of truth and understanding where my faith comes from and how do we interpret this text. And so when you go back to the church, all of that just makes sense to me, not just out of sentimentality because of the way that I was raised in the Catholic Church, although obviously that means a lot to me. It's just it's a pursuit of truth, and that pursuit of truth has led me to the Catholic Church.
Mike, you have there's a bit of resonance. I just returned to the church about a year ago, and prior to then, I also had a long season of atheism of about 7 years. I was raised Catholic and went to Catholic school, was on the altar 6 days a week, like took it extremely seriously, and then even took the Catholic Church more seriously when I was an atheist because I was trying to pick it apart. Um, and just hearing you speak on kind of seeing that you're at the precipice is pretty interesting because I was just there. And two things stand out to me. First is the concept of hound of heaven, that there's something really touching and beautiful to know that like your heart is constantly being pricked at by the Holy Spirit, because that doesn't happen to everybody. I don't think God pursues everybody in the same way. He pursues everybody, but not in the same way. And so to know that there's just like that, like I'm gonna get you, I want you, is really, really romantic. It's very beautiful and touching, because it's specific to you. And the second was I also had the same thing, and Tim's been a part of my life for what feels like longer than he ever actually has been. But it was sort of fast and true from the beginning. And I remember about 2 years ago calling him, wandering around a parking lot outside of my work and saying, I think I want to come back to the church.
Hmm.
I- maybe I'll go to confession. And you're like, why? And I was like, oh, I'm just tired. I was like, I don't actually have any more answers than I did before. I'm just kind of ready to give up, which is never something I would have done in the past, because I would think to death any question and research it thoroughly from every perspective until I could teach it. I was so well read and understood the subject. And it didn't help me. Was like the most depressing part. Was it helps to a point, but you can always, I found I was always able to get enough compelling evidence again from the opposite side that I would just vacillate back and forth on these issues endlessly. And I just called him. I was like, I'm tired. I have nowhere else to go, and I'm tired, and I feel like I'm just gonna go back to the church. And then I didn't do that, and then God kicked my ass another time with something else I won't get into, and sort of forced my hand. But yeah, it just is really, it takes a level of intellectual integrity, especially now with Francis, to look at this and say, well, I'm still going to take it seriously, and I think that's beautiful, and I commend you on it.
Yeah. Integrity is the key thing, right? That's what I was thinking the whole way through when Mike was talking. When I was in my early 20s, I was reading Pascal's Pensées, and there was an intro by T.S. Eliot, one of the few good writers I had to study at university. Most of them were just sodomite postmodernists and not worth reading, but he was pretty good. And he wrote that when the ordinary man calls himself an unbeliever, he's just cloaking a disinclination to think anything through to a conclusion. Thinking is hard work, and it can hurt. And it means also that the guys around you can get hurt by what you have to say. And you have to be a man of fortitude to actually go through with the process for yourself, and also to speak it to other people as well, because it has real consequences for your life. But Mike, like Nick, like Tim, you're a man of integrity. You talk about the importance of being strong. Surprise, surprise, you're strong. You talk about the importance of turning things around, having a good family life. You've made that real too. So it's about there being no disconnect between what you think and what's in your heart and how you act as well. So I'm not surprised as how it's turning out for you. And you're also charismatic, and guys look up to you. And when we had Elliot on this podcast a long time ago, one of the first episodes, Elliot said, look, when I knew I had 1 million YouTube subs on one channel, same again on another channel, 1 million people on Instagram too. And I was thinking, holy shit, these people are all looking to me for answers. And I'm not sure if I've got the right ones. And there's no Protestant sect that can confidently say it can't teach error. There's that doubt in the back of your mind. I'm leading my family and I'm leading these other guys looking up to me. Am I sure it's the right direction? Even my denomination isn't sure it's in the right. Whereas the Catholic Church says, the pillar of truth, this is it. The gates of hell can't prevail. And this is something that a man can fully rest on and say, this is what I'm about.
Well, you nailed it. It was a couple things that really led me to this point. And I'm literally having dreams about it. So I'm like, oh God, you're obviously kind of pulling at my heart for a reason. But it was two things. It was one, I'm responsible for my family, just like you said. And I'm like, I'm responsible for their salvation to a degree, to a strong degree. So I got to make sure that I'm guiding them in the right way. I take that role very, very seriously. And so that's one. The other one is just the intellectual and spiritual laziness of saying, I just follow Christ, bro. And that's not to insult anybody that maybe hasn't looked into it, but I'm like, it's got to be more than that. Then I just follow Christ, bro. So like, how are we going to deny all of this history and just say, I just follow Jesus, bro? You're like, really? And so being the person that I am, a thinker of sorts, I'm like, I got to get to the bottom of this. And naturally, this is where it's leading me, because I just think it's such a trope and it's so lazy and dishonest. If you're calling yourself a follower of Jesus, you need to understand why and where it came from and the fullness of the truth that comes with that pursuit. So
Yeah. And they're all going in different directions too. You got people walking in different directions saying, I'm following Jesus. And someone said, no, I'm going this way, following him. I don't know where you're going. And that doesn't make any sense.
no, it doesn't. And I was talking to actually a friend of mine the other day, and he's kind of on that point of reverting to Eastern Orthodoxy. He's a Greek guy. And he said, I found in my walk as a Protestant, he goes, it kind of like ended past a certain point. Like you read through the Bible, obviously there's always more wisdom and knowledge to accumulate from the Bible, but then, okay, so like, okay, there's the Bible. What else is there? Like he said that it kind of feels like it ends. And I'm sure you guys understand. But then now when I look back at the church history and then all these popes and these saints and all of this literature and this writing on the church, there's a never ending stream and source of this nutrient dense spiritual food is what I call it. And so like you're growing in a relationship with Christ in the kingdom through all of these different means. I mean, you were talking about Pope Pius, I think the other day, Nolan, and his talking about physical training. I said, well, where is that in the Bible? There may be a snippet. I want to hear that expanded upon. And for me, that draws me closer to the faith, even in that way, from that philosophical angle as well.
One last thing I'd say on this, Mike, if you need that last push to get over the Marian barrier that has become a cultural, seems to be a permanent monument culturally for Protestants who are reverting, is the, I hesitate to say this because I don't mean it, stumbling block of Mary. She's anything but a stumbling block. She's like the opposite one in the life of my faith. But just look to, I know you probably have, but look to the first four ecumenical councils, which most Protestants will at least pay lip service to wanting to honor and wanting to study and know. And when you do so, and you're talking about the first five heresies dealt with at those first four councils, one of them, I think Chalcedon dealt with too, and you're dealing with Arianism, Monophysitism, Nestorianism, Apollinarianism, and Pelagianism at those first four councils, all which occurred the first real 125 years of historical Christianity after the Edict of Milan, right? The first 300 years until Constantine doesn't really count because Christendom, it was very meaningful, but it was the time of the martyrs. Christendom wasn't a thing. Christianity was, but Christendom wasn't. So I'm talking first 125 years of Christendom from 325 to 450 AD. You have those four ecumenical councils. The church has only had 21. And five heresies. I would admonish you, importantly, look to Apollinarianism, dealt with really at the third and fourth council. Apollinarianism, Nestorianism, Christ as he's one person. He's one person of the three-person Trinity. He has those two natures, full nature of God, full nature of man, and they're undivided. And it's funny because as you go from heresy to heresy, Arius is like one extreme. Jesus is more man than God. The Monophysites were like, oh, okay, we get it. We don't want to make that error. So like Jesus is more God than man. No, swing. So it's the pendulum going too far. Then the Nestorians and Apollinarians are like, okay, he's equal parts, but they divide his nature in various ways. Well, he's got the mind of God and the body of a man. No. Even though he's equal parts. No, that's wrong. Okay. Well, he's got both. And this is why Apollinarianism is really important to your Marian thing, your Marian struggles. He has those two natures and they have to be mixed. They can't be divided. They're two mixed, indivisible natures. And when the Apollinarians said, well, Mary's the mother of Jesus, but not of God, they're driving a wedge through his human and his divine natures. And it's really, really important. It might be a mathematical way of calculating it, but because of what Protestants, Catholics, and Orthodox all believe, that he has these two natures and they're undivided, Mary must be the Theotokos, the mother of God, not just the mother of man. This is very, very explicit stuff, and it's not the quote unquote corrupt high medieval church that said this. It's the earliest form of the church in Christendom, 100 years after Christianity became legal in the Roman Empire. So it's very, very important to people like you who are like, I'm getting over the last hurdles vis-a-vis Mary.
No, I appreciate that. And it's not just a hurdle for me, but also if I'm going to make this change, I want to be able to defend it, because I know inevitably there's going to be, okay, bro, Pope Francis. Okay, bro, Mary. Okay, the worship of saints, purgatory, confession. And I want to have an answer for all of those definitively, not just for myself and for the salvation of my family and our souls, but also so too, I could perhaps bring people to the faith as well and be able to defend it. Apologetics it's incredibly important. So I absolutely look into that, man. There's like a wealth of stuff I'm digging through, and I got to be honest, I don't understand it all, but I will.
For those basic five questions, also last word, Catholic Answers has done throughout the years excellent work for those 5 or 6 sort of basic Protestant Catholic interface interrogations. Catholic Answers has it. I mean, they're kind of the easy questions, and therefore Catholic Answers hasn't. Now, the tougher questions about picking, bits of bone, feminist bone out of the meat, picking eggshell out of the pie mix of feminism, which got all mixed up with Roman Catholicism. Picking, showing men how to be men while following Jesus. You can't go to Catholic Answers for that. They don't know the first thing. A feminist outfit like so many of the rest. But for those questions, I urge you to go to Catholic Answers. But look, I think a good model for how to finish our discussion today, the second half of our talk, is what something Will said earlier. When he was like, look, female sports, it's a contradiction in terms. It's a male pursuit, meaning it's fundamentally dysphoric, meaning because of Christian complementarianism, if a man wanted to thrive at birthing and then caring for infants, it would be tantamount to self-hatred. That's what Will said about sports, because it's the same thing in reverse with women trying to do male things. And that is what it is for a woman to take on the curse of Adam. Adam can't take on the curse of Eve. Eve can't take on the curse of Adam, which is toil, outside labor, rising through the ranks in this bizarre postmodern corporate superstructure. And one of the few monuments in American life or Canadian life is, rise through the corporate ranks. It's a horrible monument to have. But I is the simplest explanation. I would submit this to Mike first, then Will and Nick. Self-loathing. A woman who wants to rise through the ranks of the corporate structure has gone through university. And to get to university, she had to go through 4 years of secondary education. And to get there, she had to begin taking her education seriously in what we call middle school, junior high. And take the right classes, do the right things, study the right hours. If that's inherently a male pursuit, to go train to be a breadwinner, white collar or blue collar, but in this case, we're kind of dealing with white collar corporate structure. Isn't that training a female to hate herself from the very beginning? And by the end, it's just like an exercise in self-flagellation. That's one account that I think you could give to why women, the fundamental question for today, like interrogate, pause it. Women, when they succeed in the workplace, become less religious, whereas men tend to become more religious on the average. And they probably put the important stuff on the back burner and put less important stuff like earning ahead of their faith. Like, what if they'd been hit by a bus when they're a young atheist beginning to be successful guy? Well, table that question. Men do at the very least tend toward religiosity once they've achieved wealth and success in the workplace. Women go the opposite way. So the kind of Luciferian answer is the Miltonian answer is, well, it's because they've been training to hate themselves. And that's also the Will Nolandier answer. What do you say, Mike? Nate?
Yeah, I'm not surprised to see that veering away from that religious structure and that belief, because fundamentally they're just getting away from their own nature, and the further they strive away from their own God-given nature, of course they're going to fall away from God. What I find really funny is that, and kind of sad, is that there was a study, there was a survey of these powerful women in corporations and these career women that didn't have children, and they rated their life satisfaction as higher. And I couldn't help but call bullshit on that, because these women are the least self-aware and most miserable women of all time. So I just thought that was kind of funny. I said, there's no way this study is real. But I'm not surprised to see also on the other side, men get closer to God in their pursuits, because they're more in alignment with their nature. Now, a lot of guys take this too far. You see Tate, who just worships at the altar of, self-aggrandizement and materialism. But most guys that, understand that they're image bearers of God get closer to God because they're in alignment with their nature. So, I mean, I see it pretty simply. It's sad. And that's exactly why, and I'm sure you guys can relate, my daughters are not going anywhere near the education system. They're going to go from my household to the household of their husband. And there's not going to be this satanic indoctrination process in between that you see all these normie NPC dads put their kids through.
Yep. Agreed.
Yeah. In a nutshell, it's that feminism is misogyny. It's a strange concept to get your head around, but when you understand it fully, that's exactly what it is, because it tells women that they are worthwhile as men fundamentally, and holds up the boardroom or the sports field as the model of success that they have to follow. So it's the anti-feminist guys who are actually pro-woman, the opposite of what you were told. And it's not surprising that some of these women feel like they are successful. No more surprising than there are guys who are deep in degeneracy, who've had their intellects darkened by the effects of their vices, think they're being successful. If you read Romans 1, there's an interesting comment that's really relevant here. We've got the people who didn't glorify God became vain in their imaginations, and their foolish hearts were darkened. So you're going to find in surveys that they'll say they're happy, but that doesn't mean they're living lives that are objectively good for them. And commenting on that, St. Augustine writes that by the blinding of the heart, because of the abandonment of the light of wisdom, they fell into more and more serious sins. So God allows people the bad consequences of the bad choices that they have made. And the further away you get from him, ironically, but also fittingly, the more darkened your mind becomes. So you don't even realize how far you've fallen. Grace can bring you back and actually wake you up, but they become numb to it in the end.
Yeah, I'll just read from the study itself, basically the abstract or the conclusion. Shout out to my boy Suede, who texted me last night. Yeah, yesterday? No, yeah, last night, and said he said, I remember this study where women, as they become more successful, they become less religious. I was like, you're kidding me. I can't believe there's a study on this. Can you find it? And he texted it to me. So decades of research has suggested that women are much more religious than men, which might be true for lay people. Yet our survey of 107 women and 362 men who are alumni of the White House Fellows Program finds that elite women are less likely than elite men to report religion as being important to their lives. When focusing on the fellows who are women, we find that obtaining a graduate degree from a top university, being highly committed to one's work, and being recognized for success are all associated with a lower likelihood of rating religion as important. We elucidate some of these findings with analysis of in-depth interviews. We suggest that aspiring women, this is their take of this, We suggest that aspiring women may not benefit from religion the same way men do, and that religion often fails to provide similar levels of support for elite women as for elite men, which is quite a rich interpretation of that data. I think it's true in some sense that they don't benefit from it in the same way, but I think it's more evidence of self-selection that these two things are mutually exclusive. And it's most religions. I'm not entirely sure about Talmudic Judaism, but definitely Islam and definitely Christianity. They are mutually exclusive, and so for men who are looking, and again, this is why it starts so young, and why I love hearing that you guys and your daughters, even in the debates or whatever it is, of engendering these specific differences. Hopefully, I'm using that correctly. I don't want to
Yeah, no, you
philosophically to say that they're a different species, but these specific differences throughout time, with the vector, it's a 1 degree over 18 years is an enormous disparity between a man and a woman. And so, yeah, if a woman can do it all herself, or under the illusion that she can do it all herself, not only does she not need a man, she doesn't need God. What's a young guy to do if he's trying to first lead her to heaven and second be her protector and provider, if she's under the auspices of, well, I can do all of this myself? So really, really fascinating study. Shout out to my boy Swade for sending that along.
Well, there's a secondary interpretation of the same data, a second way to crunch it. And whereas the first interpretation is a process interpretation, whereby we construct, you achieve this disparate result. Corporate women have essentially divorced themselves from their fundamentally religious nature, which is the opposite effect that success in the corporate environment has on men. That this is nothing more than a kind of vector sum of the processes that were required. The sum is the total of its parts. It's just all of that work that women had to do,
Right.
in all of the through the process of all of the indoctrination. I mean, commercials, every commercial we see, where it shows girls overcoming obstacles to study extra hard because women typically haven't been in school, definitely not for things like engineering, which is male dominated. And the assumption is topsy-turvy. It's, well, that must be bad. That's sort of the Christian way. You mentioned the Islamic way. This has been the way of the world for 2,000 years. But the assumption is always that must be bad. So the girls undergo a series of processes where they're just like, hey, get in the AP classes, study really hard, persevere, which is really a masculine virtue, as Will and Mike intoned so well. And just do this stuff, do all of these things that for 2,000 years, we all admit only boys have done as they become men. And by the time you're served up onto the gates of adulthood, what used to be manhood, now it's taken to be womanhood, you've undertaken a series of processes that essentially that subverted your nature and turned you into a man. And when a woman can't be a woman and a man can't be a man, they can't be Christian. Okay, so that's the first interpretation of the data.
If I could,
the second,
just to add to that, and each one of those things that you are summing is a result of a failure of a father. In order for each error to take place, it's because the father was failing. Yeah,
and the mom probably is no bowl of peaches, but the father is the one. Heavy's the head that wears the crown. Like I said about Francis the other day. If you're in charge, if you're in management, something they're not teaching these young ladies as they push them through the ranks through affirmative action, doing jobs they're incompetent to do. They're not teaching them when you're in management, everything's your fault, as I think comes from that movie, The Hard Way. Okay, so that's a process interpretation, whereas the conclusory interpretation would be that, it's not so much the processes, it's just a sum total kind of thing, where the sum total is more than the premises. Well, a girl can do all this stuff and not be fundamentally transformed. Yeah, her nature is transfixed, and it's not as easy to fundamentally alter it. So she goes through, does all this male stuff, starting middle school, high school, college, plays sports, which does get you kind of ready for the fight. The idea of the student athlete, the student scholar athlete, male thing. Does all this stuff, takes one sport seriously to kind of sharpen her mind, to recreate, then spends her time studying in these AP classes for the rest of the time. I'm giving it the most romantic read possible. And she's not fundamentally transformed throughout all this. Undergrad degree, graduate degree, go into the workforce. And all the while, she thinks she's working with a headwind, and that makes it extra heroic. She's actually been working with a tailwind, right? Everyone's pushing her there. It's the absolute lie of gynocentric society. They're telling you, if you're a girl, that you're doing something that's hard, and it's not. It's easy. They're telling you you're steering into a headwind, and it's with a tailwind. They're tricking you. They're gaslighting you that you're a real boy, like Pinocchio. You're not. You're not. You're doing something that's really easy. You're taking the path of least resistance, and you're being guided along the way. Remember the beginning of Billy Madison? When he's like, I passed all those grades on my own, and his dad was a rich guy who'd just been paying off his teachers. That's you, ladies. That's all you are. If you're a career woman or a college woman, sorry, them's the breaks. So what actually happens is they get there at the end on merit that wasn't theirs. It was false merit. They are just the creation of social planners. We don't need to say who the social planners are. They're just elites. There's no other name. And they arrive there and they're incredibly prideful. And it's not the processes. Remember, God first makes proud those he condemns, like Milton says. And they're there and they're like, what need have I for you? So it's an end thing. And it's the opposite kind of interpretation of the data. It's like, well, you got this. And really it's an entitlement mindset because you weren't earning it. You weren't earning any of it, ladies. You thought you were earning it, but you were entitled to it and you were being given it. So it's like double entitlement. It's the worst. God first makes proud those he condemns. And you're constitutionally and temperamentally, at the end, at least according to this second construction of the data, you are constitutionally unable now to affect a fundamentally religious position, which is to say, to genuflect. What do you guys say about that second one?
I love that. The two things that stand out most to me is the illusory nature of the success, which I don't think is highlighted enough. They think that they have done it or that what they're doing is the same thing substantively that what a man is doing. That if there's a woman CEO, if there's a high, quote unquote, high caliber female attorney who's rocking it in the pantsuit, that what she is doing and has done is substantively and temporally the same journey and the same end result that what a man has done. And men and women need to be disabused of this. It's not the same thing. It's putting lipstick on a pig, first of all. But second of all, and I think that's just a really good point. Second of all, the bitterness that I'm sure they feel, and maybe they can't even articulate it because it's probably subconscious, of to harken back to that Joe Rogan joke, the guy who breaks into the White House and every step he thinks is going to be his last step as he's running toward and through the White House, he thinks, surely I'm going to be sniped by a Secret Service guy. Surely I'm going to be taken out by a police officer. And every step he takes, he's like, how am I still alive? I would imagine that subconsciously women are experiencing the same thing of like, they keep getting further and like, how am I doing this? Men are so insufficient. Something is wrong here. My dad's so insufficient. God's so insufficient. My brothers, my uncles, society. The fact that I'm able to do this, and again, I think this is all nonverbal. I think this is all subconscious, and so I think there's a bitterness because they've been they've been let down by the patriarchy, and they think that they're entitled, they think they've succeeded. So simultaneously you have this entitlement and this arrogance, which is resting on the laurels of something that does not exist, which is this perceived success. And simultaneously, they're bitter and they hate men, and they're almost justified in their hatred of men, and they're well, not justified in their hatred of God, but their hatred of men, because they're like, I don't belong here. Why did you let me get here? This is bullshit, and I know it, and you know it, and I'm here.
Yeah. And contempt is a natural disposition. If you actually convinced your little boy, your 6-year-old boy, like, hey, you get to be daddy for the day, and I'll be like, I'll act like a kid. You be the dad for the day. You make all the decisions. You decide where we go. Like, have a yes day. I think there's a movie called Yes Day. Like, so what you're doing is you're caring for them the whole way. You're like, oh, will you hold my hand? If I had Gaby across the street, and really you're still just holding his hand.
Right.
And you're like, do you want to go to Chuck E. Cheese or McDonald's? And you're still setting the template and just letting him pick. And he's like, I'm the daddy. I say Chuck E. Cheese. That's cooler than McDonald's. Okay. Do you want to go to, I don't know, Pelicans game or a Saints game? The two stadiums are right next to each other. And you actually let him decide. Well, you're still paying the bill. You're still driving the car. You're still holding his hand crossing the street. And he's just had the best day ever. And yet, if you told him that he's not the beneficiary, he's the burdenee of the day, without having him pay or him have to be the one to stay awake driving home after the game, or him to be the one to do any of the hard stuff, he's going to be like, wow, this is what dad does. I mean, a yes day can go really wrong. Imagine the wrong kind of temperament taking this entitlement and thinking that it's the entitlor instead of the entitlee. The wrong kind of temperament, female temperament, Lilith spirit, will take that and be like, you guys are a joke. I'm the real shit. And look at how well I do corporate stuff. Look how well I do. Look at my flashcards in my AP classes where it's all the stupid looking bubble writing and everything's color coded. That's a lot of women. That's 99% of women in 2024. And it's pathetic. It's sad for them. It's sad for men. It's the failure of patriarchy. And that's what we're talking about all the time. I like this interpretation B of that event, even though I like A as well. What do you say, Will and Mike? And then we'll get out of here.
Well, you know what most of the famous female feminists had in common, right? It was weak fathers. This probably isn't a full list, but just from a couple I've got written down here: Mary Wollstonecraft, Simone de Beauvoir, Betty Friedan, Gloria Steinem. They all watched families raised, or we should say not raised, by weak fathers. So it's that bitterness about men being let down by them that fuels feminism. And what Tim is saying here, that you actually have to misform or abuse a woman intellectually for her to end up like this, shows that it's a perversion of what's natural. And this is a conclusion that even secular anthropologists with a feminist bent themselves have come to. What Tim's describing there is also the conclusion that Margaret Mead famously reached. She wrote that women may be said to be mothers unless they are taught to deny their childbearing qualities. Society must distort their sense of themselves, pervert their inherent growth patterns, perpetuate a series of learning outrages on them. So that's the process that Tim has outlined. But weirdly, I think whether we go with interpretation B or A, you end up with the same result, which is essentially, I don't think it is that they're less religious. The religion is just idolatry. It's different. It's just another religion. This is the joke. Secular liberalism is not the absence of religion. It's just the worship of the self. And that's why it really reaches its peak in the form of feminism, which is, I bow down to no one. In fact, you bow down to me. It's just self-glorification.
Great point.
And that's exactly what I've said this whole time about the red pill. And you so aptly say, red pill is feminism for men. But in this case, with these elite women, I just think it's such a gay term. It's the Luciferian inversion due to the Homer Simpsonification of men. You guys have done an incredible episode on the absconding father. And this is the theme, right? I mean, if you look at even these with these transgender kids, either absent father or spineless cucked father. And that's what it is. I mean, honestly, most of society's issues can be boiled down to that. Because a proper father, like you guys here, Nick, I'm not sure if you have kids yet. Doesn't sound like you do. Especially with our daughters, will never allow them to get put through the feminist, satanic meat grinder indoctrination machine, because that's what happens. So if more guys sacked up, stop being, dad bod having, soft bellied, defanged, soft homosexuals about them being a father, this wouldn't be an issue. And so of course they're not religious, because their examples of God through their fathers has absolutely failed them. So of course they're going to hate the patriarchy. The patriarchy's failed them completely.
Yeah, weakness invites attack throughout the animal kingdom, and we are rational animals, and appeasement doesn't work. And for too long, men have just said appease, because it's the curse of Adam to abdicate authority. And the protector role, as we've both been talking about for a while now, Mike, is fundamentally spiritual. That's the most important kind of protection you can give to your family. And if your kids turn out feminist, then it's a sure sign that you've failed.
100%. And I think that's been the driving force for me heading straight first into Catholicism, because, you see how wayward society's becoming. And with that said too, and like I said, not to dunk on my Protestant brothers here, but and you've said it many times, Nolan, is that it seems like it's the liberalism of the faith, and I want nothing to do with anything that's remotely like the liberalism of the faith, because we see the fruits that tree bears in society. And in regards to the branches of liberalism, this could easily be one of them for sure. The women going through university becoming elite, is that it poisons everything that it touches.
Yeah, the real elite woman is Mary, and there's nobody more anti-feminist than Mary. And even some of the so-called trad Catholics who might be listening now are probably going to, as Tim says, clutch their pearls, when the most important messages Mary has for women are silence and submission. Now, those are going to really rock the heart of anyone with any feminist sympathies at all. Silence and submission. You can't get more anti-feminist than that.
Yeah, think about
what's interesting.
So I just wanted to populate, because people hear that. Well, what do you mean trad Catholic? I hear Tim say that a lot. I hear Will say that some. Nick says it a lot. There's a book called The Anti-Mary Exposed by an author called Carrie Gress, who has a PhD. And that book is all about how radical feminism is bad, with the insinuation up and down every page that first wave feminism is good. After all, this lady wouldn't have a PhD if not for feminism. It's absolutely true. And she's saying, oh, Mary's good. I'm exposing the spirit of anti-Mary in the world. Turns out a lot of these trad anti-feminists are feminists, and they're the most insidious kind. It's like, well, how many years did you spend getting a PhD? And how many years once you're married did you spend researching or teaching at university? And like, there's nothing inherently wrong with writing a book. Steph wrote Ask Your Husband from Home, but it's a fundamentally different undertaking when it's at the behest of doctoral work, and it crowns university work where you're fundamentally away from family. Mary didn't go get a PhD, did she? I can't remember. No. Did she? She didn't do night school and went back. That's not overly simplistic reductionistic thinking. She's literally the model. And yeah, Jesus didn't get a PhD either. So why is it okay for men to? Because Jesus gave us the model that men should go out and do what they have to do to take care of their flock. And in the case of laymen like us, our flock is a family. Jesus' flock was all of humanity. And so it's not overly reductionistic. What were you going to say, Mike? Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you.
I was just going to say, and it's interesting coming from a couple of guys that have daughters too. Like you guys both have, Will, you got 5 daughters, you've got 6 daughters. I've got 2. I've kind of like conceded that I'm going to have an army of girls. Yeah, that's besides the point. But yeah, I'll probably have 4, 5, 6 girls in a row. That's just what's going to happen. That's God leveling the playing field after my past. That's what I'm sort of the conclusion I've come to. But no, that's the end. When you say the word trad, dude, like, I mean, I don't know if you're on, you're on social media, you're on Instagram, this whole trad movement, there are feminist undertones right?
Yes.
You got all these trad pages. I mean, Brendan on our podcast talk about this all the time. Behind the scenes, these people's marriages are a complete mess. Like I'm pretty sure Mary didn't worry about being trad. Like this whole thing is just a LARP. It's such a LARP, and it's so cringe. Like, they're all barefoot, rubbing beef tallow on their behinds, suntanning their perineum, dressed like hobbits. It's like, dude, like, come on, like. If you looked at me and my wife, the last thing you would think we're trad, but our dynamic is very much trad. So get the hell out of here with this trad bullshit. Anyways, that was a side rant.
That's what we say too. That's what
I'm
we say.
sorry, guys.
It's containment. It's a containment mechanism. We've made this point before that they want to give the anti-feminist energy somewhere to go and give it a movement, but they don't want it to have the actual true core anti-feminist content because it just helps to keep a lid on it, but in a safe, convenient place. And the giveaway is that a lot of these women are big social media presences and they're evangelizing, which is something that Mary didn't do at all and women shouldn't be doing. So it's a hot take, I suppose, that upsets a few people, but your wife really should be mainly concerned with influencing your kids rather than strangers.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Nolan. Thank you, Pantile. I've really enjoyed this one. This is a really good one.
I wish we didn't have that appointment.
Yeah, we have to run to look for a house for Nick here. But man, I don't know if anyone, we don't even really have time for many last shots. But Mike, I've really enjoyed this. I know Nick has too. Will, I'm glad that you made internet friends with Mike so that we can do this. I look forward to doing this again, hopefully soon.
I do.
Yeah,
I'd love to.
definitely.
Man. It was an honor. This was a lot of fun, dude. I'd love to come on again. Thank you again.
We'll really do that. Sometimes you say that when you're closing, and then you're like, I never had that guest on again. I had Paul Kengor on my show. I was like, that was cool. I should have him on. That was like 100 years ago, and I've never had him on. But I'm like, I'd love to have Paul Kengor. But I think we'd really like to see you recur, and maybe soon, maybe next week. And anyway, do you have any last shots? We'll give you the last shot, Mike. You can be fast.
Oh, dude, no last shots, man. You guys are been a big part of, why I've been thinking about my faith walk so critically. So thank you for all the work that you do, Nick, as well. I've just become recently acquainted with your work. Really appreciate what you're doing with CMask as well. And dude, I'm just been an honor to be here. Seriously, the guys that I kind of like looked up to throughout this movement. So it's been cool to just break bread and have a conversation. So I'd love to do this again.
Awesome. Thanks a million. Yeah, man. We game recognizes game, as they say, and you're a real one, bro. We love you.
Appreciate it, man. Love you too, man.
Take care.
Peace.